Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The first topic is from the Indian Express, a very important topic. Few other topics from today's The Hindu newspaper, and two very important topics from the PIB relevant for the prelims examination. Let's get started, but first up, you can crack the civil services examination even without coaching. Coaching is not necessary, but sometimes it does help. But whether you need coaching or not, don't ask this question to anyone. The answer to this question has to come from within. You have to answer whether you need coaching, mentorship, or not. Take a look at the syllabus. If you feel that you can cover the entire syllabus on your own, then you don't need coaching at all. But then, if you feel that there is a need that I should cover the syllabus comprehensively in a shorter possible time frame, prelims, mains, current affairs, answer writing, weekly test, monthly test, then you may and you should consider joining our latest Elevate batch, which we launched recently, where we will be covering the full prelims plus main syllabus by January 2027. So that after that, you can focus on answer writing, revision, tests, mocks, so on and so forth. And right now, you can avail our plus subscription at 17,999. Should you need it, please enroll. Otherwise, you can also prepare on your own. But while subscribing, do remember to use this code IES English, because then you will be automatically tagged to the English batch, which is the Elevate batch. Let's get started and look at topic number one from today's Indian Express. Our right to walk is broken just like our footpaths. Recently, the Supreme Court declared that right to safe, demarcated footpath is also a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution, under Articles 19(1)(a), 19(1)(b), 19(1)(c). And this topic is extremely important. How? According to reports, every year 36,000 pedestrians get killed in accidents. Pedestrians who are walking. If you look at Road Safety Network's white paper for 2025, according to this, every year we lose 1.7 lakh lives because of the road accidents. Not just that, UK's National Health Service recently initiated a program, a movement, wherein if you are an adult and if you're walking 30 minutes daily for a month, you are eligible for rewards, you are eligible for discounts. Why? Because we live sedentary lifestyle. Most of our work is done by sitting, which primarily means then there are lifestyle related problems that we face. For example, obesity, for example, hypertension, for example, diabetes. So you need to encourage people towards walking so that mobility increases. And at the same time, you will be able to prevent lifestyle diseases. But for that, we need safe, demarcated footpaths. But our footpaths have been encroached upon by street vendors, by hawks. And ultimately, these footpaths also have been used by the motorists who are riding two wheelers or three wheelers or four wheelers. Where is the space for an individual to walk on a public place? This is where an individual, remember this case, Maniyar Ilyas VP Ayappan 2026. An individual lost his 5-year old child because he was rammed into by a vehicle while he was walking, pedestrian. Then he approached the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said right to walk on demarcated footpath is a fundamental right. But how did the court come to this conclusion? That is important for us to understand. Number one, footpaths traditionally have been viewed as safe places for less fortunate ones. Less fortunate ones who do not own motorcycles or vehicles or cars, because for them there are roads. And for the less fortunate ones, there are the footpaths. So these footpaths are meant to be safe, demarcated places for you to walk, for the less fortunate ones to walk, unless and until there is a Bollywood superstar who would ram his Land Cruiser on those who were sleeping peacefully on the footpath. But be that as it may, the point is, Supreme Court said this is too narrow a view to hold, that footpaths are safe, demarcated spaces for less fortunate ones to walk, and these roads are meant for those who drive or ride their vehicles. This is too narrow a view. Why? Because footpaths have their own identity and a purpose. And the purpose of the footpath is not merely to tackle or control or prevent accidents. Because footpaths represent a broad civilizational advancement. There are societies, there are countries, different countries in different parts of the world. What they do, they encourage people to walk because it leads to mobility. And at the same time, it prevents, to a large extent, pollution as well. So these footpaths are not only the mechanisms or areas which can prevent accidents, safe walking spaces for pedestrians. No, it represents civilizational advancement because that means you have now the freedom to walk. So then you are elevating these footpaths not as the safety mechanisms or safety places to prevent accidents, but we are elevating these footpaths to institutions which represent and justify human values of dignity and mobility. How? Listen to me carefully. Supreme Court said right to walk safely on a comfortable, clearly demarcated footpath has priority over movement by motor vehicles. Look at directive principles of the state policy. These directive principles are positive obligations on the state. And one directive principle is Article 39, Clause B, which imposes a duty on the state that you have to ensure that the material resources of a community shall be so distributed so as to subserve the common good. What are these footpaths? These are material resources of a community. And are these material resources of a community meant only for the motorists to drive their vehicles on? No. These are also for what? And these are primarily for whom? These are primarily for those individuals who want to express themselves by walking. How? You are preparing for the civil services examination and you may want to revise a topic. Plug in your AirPods or earphones, walk on a demarcated footpath. This is part of your freedom of speech and expression. But while you are walking, look at the fundamental right. Article 19(1)(a) deals with freedom of speech and expression. Article 19(1)(b) gives you a fundamental right to assemble peacefully without arms at a public place. Article 19(1)(c) gives you a fundamental right to form unions, associations, and cooperative societies. So if you are walking on a safe, demarcated footpath by plugging in your earphones, ultimately what you're doing, you're expressing yourself. Second, you're assembling peacefully at a public place, and this place is a material resource of a community. And there are fellow pedestrians who are also walking with you. Maybe you will form an association with them and say, tomorrow, every morning, we should come together at 7 o'clock and we should resort to some peaceful, beautiful, amazing discussions on what is happening around the world. You're forming union, association, a society. And look at the protest movements during independent struggle. Dandi March, Salt Satyagraha, it was a movement through walking. So walking is considered to be central to our freedom of speech and expression, to our peaceful protests. And that is how Supreme Court said this is a fundamental right, not only under Article 21, which talks about right to life and personal liberty. This is also a fundamental right we can trace from Articles 19(1)(a), B, C of the Constitution. Look at the question for your mains practice. The recognition of safe pedestrian infrastructure as a component of Article 21 marks a shift from vehicle centric to citizen centric urban governance. Who should be our focus? those who are riding their cars or motorcycles, or those who are the pedestrians and walking on these public resources. So, this judgment marks a shift from our approach focusing citizens critically examine the statement in light of constitutional principles and judicial activism, because this judgment is a classic example of judicial activism. Write an answer to this question, share it with us, and we will evaluate. Let's look at topic number 2 from the Hindu newspaper on the method for caste enumeration. Census is a decadal exercise conducted every 10 years. It is conducted under the Census Act of 1948 and the census rules of 1990. Who conducts the census? The Director of Census Operations, which comes under Ministry of Home Affairs. Census for the first time was conducted in India in 1872 during the British period, during the British rule. But this was a non-synchronous census, which means it was conducted in few areas, in few provinces, but not in the entire country. But the first synchronous census, which was conducted throughout the country, was in 1881. And since then, it has been a decadal exercise, conducted each decade, 1891, so on and so forth. And the last census was conducted in 2011. The next census was supposed to be conducted in 2021, but it got delayed. Delayed because of the COVID 19 pandemic. But when we look at this law, 1948, important for your prelims exam, or these rules of 1990, they do not mandate that census necessarily should be conducted every decade. It's not mentioned in the law, it's not mentioned in the rules. Contrast with United States or Japan, for example. In these countries, either the constitution mandates or the laws mandate that census should be carried out every 10 years or every 5 years. So in these countries, constitution or the laws mandate the timeline, the time period of conducting this census exercise. But in India, although we would conduct census every 10 years right from 1881, but it is not explicitly mentioned either in the law or in the rules that it has to be a decadal exercise conducted each 10 years. The last census I told you was supposed to be conducted in 2021, but it got delayed because of the COVID 19 pandemic. Why? This census, which was supposed to be conducted in 2021, then was not conducted in 2022, 23, 24, 25, 26, and now the government has decided that we will conduct and finish the census by 2027. And there is a link to delimitation. Delimitation, you would know, Constitution originally said after each census there should be readjustment, which means as the population increases, corresponding to that, the number of seats in Lok Sabha, in legislative assembly, should also increase. And that's what we call delimitation. This happened after the census of 51, after the census of 61, after the census of 71. But then constitution was amended, and constitutional amendment said for the next 25 years we will not conduct delimitation, which means this constitutional amendment was enacted in 1976. For the next 25 years, we will not conduct delimitation, which means till 2001, the delimitation exercise will not be carried out. Why? Because if population determines the number of representatives that you can have in Lok Sabha, which means if there are some states which have implemented family planning programs, controlled the population growth, these states, particularly the southern states, would be at a disadvantage. And to ensure, to prioritize, to incentivize the states that you should implement family planning programs, no delimitation was to be conducted till 2001. But then, when this expiry date reached in 2001, another constitutional amendment act was passed that we will now freeze it for further 25 years, which means the number of seats cannot increase unless and until the next census after 2026 figures are known, which means originally we stopped increasing the number of seats by 25 years, which means till 2001. Then it was frozen further for another 25 years, which means till 2026. We will not increase the number of seats in Lok Sabha. And Constitution said if at all the number of seats will increase, that will increase once the census figures taken after 2026 are known, which means if census would have been conducted every 10 years, if it was conducted in 2021, the next census would have been conducted in 2031. So only after 2031 census, delimitation could have taken place. The number of seats in proportion to the population would have increased in Lok Sabha. But because the government delayed the census, and now it will be conducted and finalized in 2027, which means 2027 is the year after 2026. So now this 2027 census can be the basis for delimitation. And if population becomes the most important criteria for delimitation, the southern states will lose their share in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha. And the northern states, the Hindi speaking states of UP, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, these states will see exponential rise in their representation in the Lok Sabha. That is why this delimitation becomes a potentially polarizing topic for our politics. But be that as it may, the point is census is conducted normally in two phases. Phase one is house listing, phase two is population enumeration. In phase one, what happens? The census officials, they will look at the houses, they will look at the buildings, they will identify all the buildings. Through this, we will get to know very simply. Through this, what we will get to know, what is the condition of our buildings, whether people are living in kacha houses or pakka houses, whether people are living without any shelter, so that tomorrow, when we will frame policies regarding housing, we need to know for how many people do we need to provide shelter. That's why this data becomes important, this census becomes important. So in the first phase, house listing phase, all the buildings are identified. And then population enumeration will take place. That means every person will be asked, what is your age? What is your marital status? What is your religion? Whether you belong to scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. What is your education level? What is your mother tongue? Disability, if any. Fertility rate is asked for a woman. How many children do you have? And this will tell us whether our population has reached the level of total fertility rate, the replacement level of 2.1. But be that as it may, which means the census, which is conducted in two phases, in the second phase, we ask these questions whether you belong to scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. Now, listen to me carefully. Census does not enumerate all castes. Sorry. When census was first organized, conducted throughout the country in 1881, then in 1891, all the way till 1931, all castes were identified. Which means when we will go for population enumeration, we will ask people, what is your caste? And all castes will be listed, whether SC, ST, any other caste. But the next census, which was supposed to be conducted in 1941, the officials decided only to record whether you are SC or ST, not other castes. Why? Because this was the period of the Second World War. And the entire focus of the government was preserve money so that we can spend this money on winning the war. Because if we keep on asking more questions, it will consume more time, more resources, more investment. Ultimately, we don't want to get into that direction. Which means we were conducting, enumerating all castes till 1931. But after 1941 onwards, we have been only enumerating SC and ST caste groups. This is where the demand came from various political parties that we need to conduct caste census as well. This 2027 census is India's first digital first census. And at the same time, this is independent India's first caste census as well, which means we were enumerating SCs and STs. Now we will enumerate all the castes as well. This is the first time when all the castes will be enumerated under the census exercise. Was it done previously? It was done in 2011 in something known as socio-economic caste census. But there's a difference. This data was never published because there were a lot of errors. Why? Number one, this socio-economic caste census of 2011, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, it was not conducted by the MHA, by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner, because they have the expertise in conducting this decadal exercise. Instead, this was conducted by Ministry of Rural Development, Ministry of Urban Development in urban areas, and they don't have the expertise of conducting the census. And that is how a lot of errors crept in, which means this 2011 census, socio-economic caste census, not the regular census, it was not part of this decadal census, the census which is conducted every 10 years. And this caste data was never officially released because there were issues with the credibility of these numbers. Why? Listen to me carefully. Right now, and this is the crux of this article from the Hindu newspaper, the text and context article. Now, if we have to enumerate castes, how do we do that? There are two options. Either this caste column would be left blank so that whatever caste you think you belong to, you can mention it there. Or we will have a drop down menu where all the existing castes which we are aware of would be listed, and then you have to select and choose to which caste do you belong to. So these are the only two options. Either leave an open column for caste. This is exactly what socio-economic caste census did in 2011. Or you will have a drop down menu where all the castes will be listed. You just need to pick and select which caste do you belong to. This is what Bihar government did when they conducted the caste survey in 2022-23. But what are the challenges? Socio-economic caste census, which was conducted in 2011, where the caste column was blank, which means whatever you want to add as your caste, you can do that. Once the census was done, socio-economic caste census was done, although data was not released publicly, this data was submitted to the Ministry of Rural and Urban Development. But according to reports, 46 lakh different caste names got mentioned, which means you are identifying caste, and the number of castes are now 46 lakh. How is it possible? This is possible because when you keep it open ended, I am writing my caste as, let's say, Bansal or Agarwal, although the caste is Banya, but you are mentioning these names because you think that this is your caste. And that is how 46 lakh castes got added in socio-economic caste census. Let's look at the history. In 1931, which was the last census which was conducted, which collected all the caste data, the number of castes were only 4,147. Now, from 4,147, has it increased to 46 lakh castes? How is it possible? It may be possible that a caste has been further divided into subcastes. But even after further division, this number, 46 lakhs, looks unimaginable. And this is what the Supreme Court was told by the Union government in an affidavit in 2021. Assume that some castes may bifurcate into subcastes, but the total number of castes cannot be risen exponentially high to this extent, which means we cannot rely on this caste census data. For example, in 2011 socio-economic caste census, which was where the caste column was kept open-ended, respondents, which means the people, they were asked to name their castes. Some people wrote Gupta, Agarwal, Bansal, so on and so forth, although they belong to the Banya caste, which increased the number of castes. Right now, there is a test going on. in some 16 states. This may not be the final method, but this testing is going on right now, which means on a pilot project, we are asking the people to add their own castes into this digital form. Whether this will be the final way in which the caste census will be carried out, or will government resort to a drop down menu where you are asked to choose your caste, we will have to wait and watch. But in this current test, the same open ended column of caste is provided to the respondents to record their caste, which means we may come up with the same number again, 46 lakh castes in India. According to the government, there are 2650 OBCs in the central list. There are 1170 in the scheduled caste list, 890 in the scheduled tribes list. State government have their own OBC list, and this is the question which was once asked in your prelims examination. Who can add a caste to an ST list? Who can add a tribe? Who can add a tribe to the ST list? Who can add a caste to the ST-SC list? This can be done by president based on the law enacted by the parliament. So president will issue an order under constitution scheduled caste order and will add or remove names to this SC list or ST list. So there is one list of SCs, one list for STs throughout the country. But for OBCs, socially and educationally backward classes of citizens belonging to OBCs, center has its own list, states have their own list. So who has the power to add a caste to OBCs, both center as well as states? But who has the power to add a caste or a tribe to SC or ST list? That power is only with the president, which means the central government. This question was asked in your prelims examination. But what are the views on this caste census? Should caste census be carried out or not? Supporters of caste census say our constitution believes in substantive equality. And what is the substantive equality? Substantive equality focuses on outcome. Outcome in the sense you're all preparing for the civil services examination. You are writing the mains examination where you will have to write answers in 250 words or 150 words. If UPSC says that all the students who are attempting the mains examination will be given 3 hours each to write an answer, is this equality? Yes. But is this substantive equality? No. Why? Because we have to focus on outcome. And what is the outcome? If there is somebody who is visually disabled or physically challenged, you are not in a position to write on your own. You need a scribe to write. We will give you more time, extra time to finish the question paper. This is called substantive equality because we will not only make rules which appear equality for everyone, but we have to focus on the outcome. And the outcome will make it substantive equality, which means we will focus on those differently abled individuals who should be provided with more time to finish the answer copies. And if the reservation policy in India, for example, under Article 15 or Article 16, where reservation is provided to socially and educationally or economically backward sections of the society in educational institutions and in government jobs, which caste is more backward? Which group is more backward? We need to know. Because after all, SC is not a homogeneous group. ST is not a homogeneous group. OBCs are not homogeneous group, which means you need to know within these groups who is more backward, who deserves more representation, and then it will focus on substantive equality. And unless and until this caste data number is known, we will not be able to provide equality. We need accurate social data. But then there are critics who say that, although not directly mentioned in the constitution, but the purpose is to reduce caste consciousness. But by providing caste census, you will become more caste conscious, which means maybe you were not aware of your caste, although highly unlikely, but now you will identify yourself with your group. So it will lead to more caste consciousness rather than national consciousness. And at the same time, it may further divide the caste groups, further divide the people along caste lines, which will violate the principles of liberty, principles of fraternity, which is mentioned in the preamble, which is one of the objectives of the Constitution. So, how this caste data will be captured? Will this caste column be left open ended, or will a drop down menu of the caste be provided? We will have to wait and watch. And that's where the opposition says that more consensus should be built so that we don't get embarrassed by the number of castes which will be thrown up if the census exercise is carried out. That is why consult sociologists, political leaders, others to decide which is the best way of capturing the caste data of the people. That is topic number 2 for your examination. Okay, let's look at topic number 3. School dropout rate falls across key stages according to a report. Look at the practice question for your prelims. Which of the following statements is or are correct? Read these statements and let me know what is the right answer. To change the name of a ministry at the union level, a constitutional amendment act is needed under Article 368. No, you just need to change, modify the rules of procedure, the rules of business, the allocation of the business rules. That's what you need to change. This is what talks about various ministries. Why? HRD ministry was renamed as Ministry of Education in 2020. This statement is correct because previously this ministry was known as Ministry of Human Resource Development. But now, since 2020, it has been renamed as Ministry of Education. Constitution classifies ministers into cabinet, ministers of state with independent charge. That is not true because it is the allocation of business rules which define whether you are a cabinet minister or a minister of state or minister of state with independent charge, not the constitution. So, A, only one is correct. Why this becomes important? Because this report, Unified District Information System for Education Plus, this is released by Union Education Ministry. Maybe tomorrow there is a question in your prelims examination whether this report is released by Niti Aayog or by any other ministry. But you need to remember it is released by the Ministry of Education. And what is this Unified District Information System on for Education Plus? Although this is not a report is based on this database. So who prepares this database? Who prepares the report based on this database? That is done by Union Ministry of Education. And what is this database? This database collects information from schools. So schools are given options that you can upload all the data on this particular portal, on this particular database. And now Union Ministry of Education will have a full visibility on the education system in this country. As to what? Data such as student enrollment, dropout, whether the retention is taking place or not, about teachers, infrastructure. This database is maintained by Department of School Education and Literacy, which is under Ministry of Education. Now the question for you is this data given by only the government schools or by private schools as well? Government schools as well as private schools. So all the government schools, all the private schools, they will add data onto this portal, and that data will then tell us about the retention of the students, about the enrollment of the students, about the dropout rates, about the infrastructure, about the teachers. And what does this report talk about, which was recently released by Ministry of Education? It says women now form the majority of the nation's teaching force. This talks about that we are moving towards a gender balance in our education system. What is the percentage of women teachers in our schools? Now it has gone up to 54.9%. That's the key takeaway number one. Number two, student retention. What is student retention? I was enrolled in the school, but then for the next year also, I am continuing, whether in the same school or in a different school, but my education continues. That's what we call retention. This student retention at the middle class level, which means class 6 to 8, has gone up to 83.7%. Previously, it was 82.8, which means we are increasing. At the secondary level, which is 10th standard, it has increased to 51.9%. Last year, it was 47.2. So, student retention has increased at the secondary level as well, at the middle level as well. Not just that, gross enrollment ratio has also increased. So, these are the children in the age group of, let's say, 6 to 14, and they are to be enrolled in the schools, whether middle schools, primary schools, or these are the children who are to be enrolled in the secondary schools. Of all these people of the eligible age, how many of them are admitted in the schools, enrolled in the schools? That is what we call gross enrollment level ratio. At the secondary level, it has gone up to 71.7%. Although at the middle level, we have almost achieved more than 90% of the gross enrollment level ratio. Last year, it was 68.5% at the secondary level, which means our system, our education system is becoming more and more efficient when we talk about in terms of women teachers, retention, enrollment. But most important improvement is seen in the number of schools who now have computers. Digital literacy is important. Not only those schools which have computers, but those schools who have computers as well as internet connectivity. So there has been an increase in the number of schools with computer access, which has gone up to 69.9% this year. The number of schools with internet has also gone up to 67.5%. And even more important is that there are 95% of schools which are powered with electricity. 98.5% schools have girls' toilets. 97.2 have boys' toilets. This is ensuring dignity and equality for the students. These data points are very important, crucial for your mains answer writing. If you don't back your answer with data, latest reports, committee recommendations, Supreme Court judgments, your answer will be bland. That is why these data points are very important, and link it with another important landmark judgment of the Supreme Court delivered this year in 2026. Remember the case name Dr. Jaya Thakur v. Government of India and others. It was in this judgment that a two-judge bench of the Supreme Court said right to access of menstrual health and hygiene is also a fundamental right under Article 21 and 21 capital A of the Constitution. Because if there is a woman, if there is a girl child who is menstruating, but in the school there is no infrastructure provided, infrastructure in terms of separate toilets for women and men, sanitary napkins should be provided in these schools. Because if that is not provided, I will skip the school for today, which will affect my education. And it violates equality. Because if I compare myself with a girl who is from a well off family, who can afford a sanitary napkin, she may get it from her home and she will attend the school, but I cannot. So, if the schools are not providing infrastructure which ensures menstrual health and hygiene, it violates the autonomy of a girl child, violates her dignity. Because I cannot be expected to use a washroom which is used by boys during my period. This affects my dignity. It affects my equality because a wealthy girl may access sanitary napkins, but I cannot. which denies me right to education, which is a fundamental right under Article 21, capital A of the Constitution. And Supreme Court said this is poverty, but this poverty is a menstrual poverty. Because in your schools, if there are no functional toilets, forget about separate toilets for men and women. What if there are no toilets at all? What if water availability is not there in the toilets? Sanitary products are not available. And there is no mechanism to discard your sanitary napkins. This violates the dignity and the autonomy of the girls. And Supreme Court said this is stigma. And because of that, dropout rates will increase. If not, dropout rates will increase, but you will see that there will be a drop in the attendance of the girl students. And finally, the court issued mandamus, the writ of mandamus, where the court directed that all states and union territories, you have to ensure functional, where water availability should be there, sanitary napkins should be there, safe disposal mechanism for sanitary napkins should be provided. So, functional, gender segregated toilets be provided in every school. Second, adequate menstrual hygiene facilities be provided. Safe disposal mechanism, sanitary napkins should be provided, so on and so forth. But why this judgment is even more important, because this time the Supreme Court went a step further. Because normally, what the court does, it says right against adverse effects of climate change is a fundamental right under Article 14 and 21. But how do you enforce it? For that, a law has to be enacted by the parliament. In this case, Supreme Court went a step further. Supreme Court said if you don't comply with this judgment, then government schools, you will have to face accountability. Maybe we will sack the principals. We will take action against the bureaucrats who are responsible for implementing school education in your district. What about private schools? You will face derecognition if you will not comply with the Supreme Court verdict. So, this verdict also spoke about enforceability. And while delivering this verdict, Supreme Court quoted the PAD project, which said period should be an end of sentence, not the end of girls' education. What is period? In languages, in our conversations, if I tell you, no, in this case, you are wrong, I'm not going to agree with your argument, period. Period means full stop. Full stop means end of the sentence. Supreme Court said period may be an end of sentence, but period, the monthly menstrual cycle for women, should not lead to end of girls' education. This quote becomes important, which you can write whether in your essay or in your GS1 or in your GS2 answer. This is another topic for discussion. Great. Okay. Let's look at another article linking women's incomes and healthcare. Very important article. The female labor force participation rate is surging. And according to this article, it is real. What is India's female labor force participation rate? It has risen from 23.3% in 2017-18 to 41.7% in 2023-2024. Female unemployment has also dropped, now at 3.2%. What is the source of this data? Economic Survey 2025-26. What are you talking about? All the women in our country above the age of 15. That's the denominator. All the women above the age of 15, that's the denominator. Numerator, all the women in this age group who are either employed or looking for employment, which means they are unemployed, but they are actively searching for employment. Into 100, that will tell you the total female labor force participation rate. Although we should be focusing more on the number of women who are employed, but this labor force participation rate for women is also important because we get to know how many women are actually seeking employment actively. Although they are unemployed, but they're actively seeking employment. That is the labor force participation rate for women, and it is increasing. By 2047, when the agenda is we want to become a Viksit Bharat, by 2047, our goal is that this rate should go up to 70%. Right now, it is 41.7%. But in the intermediate, by 2030, this rate should be 55%. What is the article trying to say? Article says that we are undergoing two simultaneous revolutions in India. Which are these revolutions? Number one, rising female labor force participation. And number two, a shift from infectious to chronic lifestyle diseases. We tend to focus on those diseases which are infectious. For example, cholera, malaria, and other infectious diseases. Now, according to the writer, there is a shift. Now we tend to focus on lifestyle diseases. For example, sedentary lifestyle that we have, where bulk of our time is spent while working on our computers and laptops. You're all the time sitting on your study desk or on your chair in the office. So you don't walk a lot. And that leads to lifestyle related diseases such as hypertension, such as diabetes, such as obesity. According to this writer, there are two simultaneous revolutions going on. One is increase in the female participation in the labor force, and the second is our shift that now we tend to shift focus more on lifestyle related diseases, because the argument is prevention is better than cure. How? Listen to me carefully. This article uses a natural experiment from India's 2018 EPF reform. What is that reform? You're working in an organization, in an organized sector. There is cost to company, CTC as we call it, which means this is your basic salary, this is your HRA, this is other benefits, then there are taxes, then there is contribution to your PF, Employment Provident Fund, which primarily means that your CTC does not match accurately, does not reflect your take home salary. Because your CTC may be one cost to company, company pays you on paper 1 lakh rupees per month. But then Nirmala Tai comes in between and snatches a part of this money in the form of taxes. And then a part also goes into your provident fund. In 2018, a reform was implemented wherein it was said that for women, as soon as the women are recruited, employed for the first 3 years, their EPF contribution should go down from 12% to 8%, which means how much do you contribute to the PF that is based on your basic salary. Initially, 12% of the basic salary should go into your provident fund contributions. But now the reform was for a woman who has just been recruited, just been hired, just been appointed, she will instead contribute less, which means 8% to EPF, which means now you will take more as take home salary. Where are you spending this extra money as a woman? That's the key question that we need to answer. And according to that survey, we realized that female led households, they have benefited, because if I give you money, I'm the state, I'm giving you money, and this money I'm giving to a man that you spend it, the man in all likelihood will spend it on cigarettes, BD, liquor, gambling. But if I instead give this money to the female head of the family, she is more likely to invest in the education of the children, more likely to invest on the nutritional standards of the children. which means in all likelihood we should give this money to a woman. And there are statistical surveys which back this claim. This is not out of thin air. Which means when women and women led households, because now you are contributing less to your EPF, which means you take more salary in hand. Where do you spend that extra money? You spend in such a manner that overall healthcare expenditure has dropped by 11.6%. Dropped, which means you are less going to the hospital, which means less hospital visits, less buying of the medicines. Why do you do that? Does that mean you are neglecting health? No. Instead, you are focusing on your personal physical well being, which means you are now eating nutritious food. You are going for yoga, or you are spending money in the gym so that you want to become physically fit. And physical fitness would mean less number of visits to the hospital, less number of medicines that you will consume, because you are now focusing more on nutrition and physical fitness. Which means the interpretation is that women who aren't valuing healthcare less, they're not, it is not that now less hospital visits mean we are neglecting health. No, they are reallocating that money towards preventing illness, because prevention is better than cure. This is something which we were already told through the writings of Esther Duflo, Abhijit Banerjee, Nyohas. Through their writings, they have always said, by their researches, studies, that who is the beneficiary that determines. That means we need to understand intention. If your intention is that you want to give this money to women are more likely to spend this money towards nutrition, towards the children's well-being, towards education. And when you focus more on preventive healthcare, which means there will be less burden on our hospitals. At the same time, look at the global picture. Mexico. In Mexico, cash transfers are routed to mothers rather than fathers. They started this experiment that if the state wants to provide subsidies or benefits, we will route this money through women, not through fathers, through mothers, not through fathers. And then what was the outcome? We realized that now you are spending more for child nutrition, you are spending more for your health and well being of the children, because otherwise, this money would have been misused by the fathers for liquor, for gambling, for cigarette and the bidis. Esther Duflo in 2003 conducted a survey in South Africa. In South Africa, there is an old age pension scheme which goes on. Old age pension is given to elderly, but to grandmothers, not to grandfathers. And when this money is given to grandmothers, they spend this money on the granddaughters. So it matters what is going to be the identity of the recipient. And these are the studies that you need to quote along with this report where we talk about EPF reform of 2018, and that led to women spending more money on preventing diseases rather than curing the diseases. So, although the hospital visits reduced, the number of medicines you are consuming reduced, but that doesn't mean that women are neglecting health. It only reinforces our belief that you are spending more money on preventing the diseases. Okay, let's look at two articles from today's PIB, basically yesterday's press releases. Number one, Mizoram's Natural History Museum has been notified as the 21st designated repository under Biological Diversity Act 2002. What is this Biological Diversity Act? In 2002, when this law was passed, this law spoke about a designated repository. What is this designated repository? Basically, an institution which is officially authorized by the law to do what? A new plant species has been discovered, a new animal species has been discovered. We need to store these samples somewhere. And for that, in different parts of the country, we should have these national museums, national repository. And that is how Mizoram's Natural History Museum has become the 21st repository, 21st designated repository under the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Also, you need to understand Mizoram. This institution is located within Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot. More than 7,500 species of flowering plants, more than 2,000 faunal species are found in this region. And that's what makes this museum, this National History Museum of Mizoram, a very important repository under this Biological Diversity Act of 2002. That is important. Second, Union Tribal Affairs Ministry has launched TribeX. What is this TribeX? It is a digital learning platform for tribal arts, culture, and traditional knowledge. You need to understand. Look at the wording of PIP. It says in a landmark initiative. When it is landmark, which means it becomes a potential topic for your examination. First of its kind digital learning platform. That makes it even more important for your prelims exam. Tribal history is mostly oral. It passes from generations to generations, not predominantly in the written, but in an oral fashion. Right. But what is this traditional knowledge? Even before antipyretics, analgesics were invented by so called West, tribals were aware that which forest produce will cure fever, or how neem can be used as an antiseptic, how turmeric can be used for clearing wounds. This knowledge needs to be protected so that it is transferred to our future generations. Similarly, art forms, paintings, tribal paintings, Beal, so on and so forth. We need to protect it. We need to conserve it. And then we need to transfer this knowledge to our future generations so that these tribal art forms and culture, this tribal traditional knowledge is protected. And for that, this initiative, TribeX. And what is this TribeX? It's a new digital learning platform released by whom? By the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. What is the purpose? To preserve and promote India's tribal heritage. Tribal wisdom, for example, how to cure, uh, let's say, fever or other ailments, art forms, their culture, dances, all these traditional knowledge systems, how to preserve them. For that, we have TribeX. But this TribeX platform has also collaborated with some institutions, such as Sampurnanand Sanskrit University in Varanasi. And through this, UGC recognized diploma programs will be offered. Certificate courses will be provided in various tribal art forms, which will lead to preservation, conservation of the tribal identity and the culture. And I told you that tribal culture is mostly oral history. So all the voices, stories, they needs to be preserved and conserved. And for that, this TribeX, this is the digital learning platform, becomes very important. With these topics, we come to the end of our discussion on today's The Hindu newspaper. We discussed one article from Indian Express, few articles from The Hindu, two important articles from the PIB. For example, this museum, which is National History Museum, it has an expertise in pteridophytes. Pteridophytes have xylem, phloem, and they reproduce through spores, right? How is this topic? And this is where I will give you an assignment today. How is this topic related to the Nagoya Protocol? You need to search, study, and let me know in the comment section so that every day, if we give you assignments, you should not only be spoon fed, you should do some hard work on your own as well. How is this topic related to Nagoya Protocol? When did, if at all, India did, when did India ratify this protocol? And what is this Nagoya Protocol all about? Do let me know in the comments. Should you wish to get the PDF of the session, this PDF is available on my Telegram channel. The link to join my Telegram channel is provided in the video description. I'll see you again. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Goodbye.